Aloha. It is my pleasure to introduce Kelsey Keister to you. She is originally from the the Northeast Ohio. She came to Hilo with a background in neuroscience, a call to change the social political arena, and a fondness for monk seals. She obtained a professional internship where she was able to braid these three drivers together. Please welcome Kelsey.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Aloha, everyone. Thank you for attending my socially distanced TCBES professional internship presentation that I did with the Marine Mammal Center at Ke Kaiola. The title of my talk today is Using Community-Engaged Conservation Methods and a Dedicated Response Volunteer Corps to Reduce Negative Anthropogenic Interactions with Endangered Hawaiian Monk Seals. So to start off, I'll give you a little outline of my talk today, but I'll first direct your attention here to this video on the right in case you've never seen a monk seal. And just as a note of housekeeping, throughout this presentation, if you see any photos or videos without photo credit underneath, that means that I took them. So in terms of the outline of my talk, I'm going to start by going over the background and purpose of my project and explain my internship agency. Next, I'll go over the approaches and strategies I used throughout the course of my project. Next, I'll talk about the outcomes of my project and some of the deliverables that I gained. And lastly, I'll talk about the discussion and conclusion and go over how this internship has informed my professional path. So to start off, I'm going to give you a little background about Hawaiian monk seals as a species. So Hawaiian monk seals are considered endangered. There's only about 1,400 individual seals left in the wild. About 1,100 of these seals are found up here in the northwestern Hawaiian Islands, and 300 of them are found down here in the main Hawaiian Islands. So Hawaiian monk seals are an endemic species. They're only found here in Hawaii. The Hawaiian word for monk seal is ilio holo I ka ua ua, which translates to dog running through the rough waves. Hawaiian monk seals are unique in that they occupy both marine and terrestrial habitat. So in terms of their critical habitat range, it extends about 5 meters inland on the shoreline and consists of the bottom 10 meters of habitat from shore out to the 200-meter depth contour for marine habitat. So monk seals spend most of their time in the ocean, foraging and hunting, but they do come on land to perform 3 very important behaviors. The first thing that we'll see monk seals doing on land is resting or sleeping. And this is the most common reason you'll see them on the land. The second time that you'll see them haul out onto the land is when they're undergoing their yearly catastrophic molt. So this is when the monk seals shed their outer layer of skin and fur, and they'll be on the shore anywhere from 1 to 2 weeks. The third time that we'll see monk seals out on the land is when they have a pup. Monk seals stay with their pup for about 45 days, and in that time, they're usually either on the land or in very near shore marine habitats. So as I mentioned earlier, Hawaiian monk seals are an endangered species. They face many different threats to survival. Most of them are anthropogenic in origin. On this slide, I'll go over 2 of them. The first threat that I want to talk about is marine debris. So this snapshot that I have here on the left was taken from the Star Advertiser, and it shows a picture of a seal with a fishing knife in her mouth, and this is actually a seal on Big Island. And what this highlights is it highlights the dangers of marine debris for monk seals. So the things that we really worry about are sharp objects like fishing hooks that can actually get caught in the seals' mouths, or they can be ingested by the seals. And we also worry about things like fishing line and fishing nets that are actually an entanglement risk that they can get tangled up in. Another very important threat to survival to talk about is the destabilization of marine food webs that often results in resource shortages for monk seals. So over here on the right is a photo from the Marine Mammal Center. This is an emaciated Hawaiian monk seal pup. Unfortunately, starvation and emaciation are very common for the monk seal population that's up in the northwestern Hawaiian Islands. So part of what the Marine Mammal Center does is it rehabilitates these seals back to a healthy weight and then releases them back up to where they came from. And while these are both very important threats to think about, they're not the specific threats that I targeted for my project. So for my project, I focused specifically on mitigating the threat of negative human-seal interactions. And I wanted to highlight this study here because it actually came out right while I was in the middle of doing my internship. So it was published in October of 2019. And so what these three researchers did is they tracked the hashtag monk seal on Instagram for 1 year. And interestingly, what they found is when they looked at people who posted pictures of monk seals, 22% of the pictures that were posted showed people that were too close to the seal. They were within 3 meters of a seal. And over 17% of the social media posts that they found indicated that there was a disturbance to the animal. So if you look at this graphic here up on the top right, in over here where it says A, it shows someone who took a picture of a monk seal from a safe distance. B shows a picture of a monk seal that was taken too close, right? The people were within 3 meters of the seal. And then C shows a picture of a monk seal that was taken within 3 meters, so they were too close. And obviously you can see that there's a disturbance there with the seal as well. And so my internship focused specifically on mitigating these negative human-seal interactions and emphasizing the importance of giving seals space when they come out onto the beaches and occupy that terrestrial habitat. So as I mentioned previously, I did my internship with the Marine Mammal Center's Hawaiian monk seal hospital, Ke Kaiola. Ke Kaiola is the world's only endangered Hawaiian monk seal hospital, and it furthers the Marine Mammal Center's mission, which is to advance global ocean conservation through marine mammal rescue and rehabilitation, scientific research, and education. And so they do this by carrying out their mission in 3 ways. They use a science-based rehabilitation program, a highly trained and well-managed volunteer stranding response network, and coordinated community efforts and partnerships to inspire the local community to protect, care for, and ensure the future of this endangered species. So for my internship, I focused mainly on these latter 2 parts to carry out my mission. So for my internship, I worked for Ke Kaiola's response team. The goal of the response team is to respond to monk seals that have hauled out on Hawaii Island. And so when we get a call about a monk seal that has hauled out on Hawaii Island, what we do is we set up a seal awareness zone. These seal awareness zones are pretty much buffer zones for the seal to educate people and bring awareness to giving the seals enough space where they can rest peacefully and so that people can be on the beach safely. And so we do this by having things like over here on this picture on the right, we have the physical aspects like the ropes and the signs that we set up. But the most important tool that we have in establishing these seal awareness zones is actually ourselves and our capacities to conduct positive outreach, which I'll be expanding upon later. So pretty much our goal is to go out and construct these seal awareness zones, but additionally to conduct positive outreach with people regarding the monk seals. My internship was really cool because as it sort of progressed, I gained many more responsibilities and sort of evolved into a leader for the response team. I'm going to be going into all of these responsibilities in more detail later on, but I wanted to just give you first a brief overview of some of the responsibilities and my role at Ke Kaiola. So first and foremost, I conducted community outreach at seal haul-out sites, right? These are the seal awareness zones that I was just talking about. I also dispatched the monk seal response phone, or the hotline, for the Hawaii Island seals. I helped to verify and record monk seal sighting data and manage the monk seal database. I sent out weekly response volunteer updates. I helped to create volunteer resources and implement new volunteer initiatives for the response team. I also provided bi-weekly facility tours to the public, along with other informal science education opportunities. And lastly, I surveyed some of our more remote shorelines and helped to identify seals that had hauled out there. So that's the introduction to my presentation. Next, I'm going to move on to some of my approaches and strategies, but I wanted to point out this video of one of our juvenile seals here on the island. In this video, you can see him playing with a sea cucumber, which is super important for his development as he learns how to navigate the oceans as a juvenile seal. So this is just one of the ways that you'll see monk seals in nearshore environments. The main approach that I decided to take for my internship was a community-engaged conservation approach. A community-engaged conservation approach revolves around evoking positive emotions in people, and more specifically, emotions like awe. And evoking emotions like awe and inspiring awe in people has the most long-lasting and effective impacts in terms of changing their behaviors. And the way that you inspire awe in people is through the use of storytelling. right? You're not going to conduct effective outreach by just throwing numbers or facts at people. You have to engage them, right? You have to tell them stories about some hardships that the seals have overcome or about some specific behaviors that the seals like to do. And this is how you're going to get that sort of visceral, emotional reaction out of people. And if you can do this, if you can inspire awe in people and make them feel emotionally connected with the seals, what you're doing is inspiring them to become eco-guards for local species. And what this does is it actually helps agencies like Keikaiola, because what happens is the community starts doing this conservation advocacy for us, right? They become eco-guards, they feel invested in the species, and they want to help protect it. And this is all done through positive outreach that does inspire awe. And the reason that I chose to take this approach is not just because I think that community engagement is great or that I love it. It's actually grounded in theories of neuroscience and psychology, right? Among all species, among humans, among primates, rats, rewards are always more effective learning cues than punishments. So evoking these positive emotions in people will always be a more effective learning tool and outreach tool than negative emotions. So if I took a purely regulatory approach and told people what they can't do or that they can't go near the seals, that would have a much less effective outcome than by inspiring people and trying to get them to feel a connection with these seals. And so that's one of the reasons that I decided to use this community engaged conservation approach, especially with my outreach. One of Keikaiola's greatest strengths, or its most greatest strength, is its dedicated response volunteer corps. So the Response Volunteer Network at Keikaiola has over 100 dedicated volunteers who donate their time and efforts into helping to conserve this species. So as I evolved to help lead the response team, I utilized a very similar approach to outreach. And what I wanted to do was reinforce the positive aspects of the response team. And the first step to doing this was actively listening, right? So I would actively listen to concerns or questions that people had, and then in turn, you provide resources that address those concerns and those questions. And so what this does is not only does this reassure the volunteers that Keikaiola is listening, but it also builds volunteer confidence so that they are successful messengers, right? So that they have all of the tools and the skills and the confidence that they need to go out and be those positive messengers and inspire those positive emotions. And what that will do is that will help them to be the conduits for fostering local environmental stewardship. And so part of the way that we did this was through communication with volunteers. I mentioned that I sent out updates. Sending the volunteers updates maintain critical information pathways that would give them information about where seals were and any sort of changes in the volunteer program. And we did that through the use of Volgistics, which is an online volunteer logistics software. We also did things like provided four-wheel drive vehicles for volunteers to access some of the more remote beaches. You can see here, this is my favorite of the seal mobiles that we have. And so again, the approach that I really took with the volunteers was building on the existing strengths of the team and building confidence to improve on its overall strengths. The approach that I took towards monk seal surveys and data management was fairly straightforward. However, it was a little bit challenging because you want to make sure that you correctly identify seals, but you're also maintaining an appropriate distance, right? The whole point of this project is to mitigate these negative human-seal interactions. So the database that I helped to contribute to was one that's run by NOAA, part of the Hawaiian monk seal research program, and it included sighting data for the seals on Hawaii Island. So over here on the left, you can see a picture of me documenting a seal or taking a photo of a seal on some pahoehoe lava. And in this photo, you can see that I'm maintaining a safe distance from the seal. The seal is not disturbed whatsoever. This seal actually didn't even wake up from its nap. So I was able to take a photo of it and it was none the wiser. And while that's great that the seal wasn't disturbed, it does pose a problem for getting clear pictures of the identification tags. Over here on the right, you can see sort of a picture of what these tags look like. Each seal has two tags, a distinct tag on each flipper with identifying letters and numbers. But as you can see, these tags are often submerged in the water, they're flipped over, they can get chipped or the paint can rub off. And so it's important to have other ways to identify the seals. And so a large portion of the beginning of my internship was learning how to identify seals based on their physical characteristics, right? So their scars or their natural bleach marks or distinctive facial markings. And so that is the approach that I took towards the surveying and the data management aspect. I also provided a lot of informal science education opportunities throughout the course of this internship. So not only did I give the biweekly facility tours at Keikaiola, but I also was fortunate to work with the Hawaii School and Youth Programs Manager. We did a educational program at Mokupapapa Discovery Center with over 100 middle schoolers. And Keikaiola also took some educational tools and materials to last year's Run for the Dry Forest at Pu'uva'ava'a, where we conducted some really great outreach. And so my approach to this was to tailor my messaging style, my education messaging style, to the group that is present, right? I'm not gonna talk to Keiki in the same way that I would talk to Kupuna. And more challenging is when you have those two types of people or a diverse group of people, right? So multiple different kinds of people in the same group. And so you have to deliver this information in a way that's digestible for everyone. And in my informal science education, yes, it was important to inform people about monk seals, right? And educate them about the importance of Keikaiola, the Marine Mammal Center, and how we're working to carry out our overall mission. But more importantly, what I did is I used the monk seal as a vessel for education about larger conservation issues, right? Because you can talk to people all day long about things like climate change or marine debris or the destabilization of marine food webs. But it's a very abstract theoretical thing. But if you can connect how those threats are affecting the super cute seal that's splashing around in front of people, that's when it clicks, right? That's when they make that connection. And at that point is when you can start introducing ideas or suggestions about behavior changes, right? About being a more conscious consumer or making more environmentally sustainable choices. But you can't do that and you can't deliver that message effectively unless you get that click, right? Of how those overall issues affect the cute seal that people are seeing in front of them. So that's the approach I took to informal science education. Next, I'll transition to talking about some of the outcomes that I had through my internship. But first, I wanted to show you this video of Kaulana navigating over some lava rocks. He definitely gets where he needs to go, but he is not always the most graceful when he is doing it. So the first deliverable or outcome that I had from my project was meaningful and challenging work. Obviously, I chose this project because I really was interested in monk seals, but in working with a species that has such a small subpopulation here and that is so endangered and does face quite a few threats, you really grow to care for the species. I have gotten to know these seals on an individual level, on a subpopulation level, and working for a species that I have an emotional connection to is very important to me. But I think more importantly and more meaningfully, I realized that monk seals are only one species in our intangible web of ecosystem connections, right? So the health of this species is dependent on the health of other species and other ecosystems. So it's not just about protecting these seals, it's about protecting our ecosystems from Mauka to Makai, because it's all interconnected. And doing advocacy for these seals, I felt that I was reaching people for other things too, right? I was making an impact that would have lasting effects on some of these other ecosystems. So that was very meaningful to me. This photo in the top right here is a picture that I took of some marine debris, of some fishing line that I had found in one of the remote shorelines that I was surveying. And what was interesting about this experience is I had bent down to pick up this big piece of fishing line, and I noticed that nearby there was a group of fishermen that were watching me. It wasn't their fishing line, they had just been fishing nearby. And I realized two things, right? I realized that first off, they were watching me pick up this piece of trash without anyone else around, right? It's not like it was a beach cleanup day with a, social media hashtag beach cleanup. I was doing this of my own volition. And secondly, I had on my Marine Mammal Center, Hawaiian monk seal response shirt on and my hat on. And so they saw that I was doing this work, right? And on behalf of the Marine Mammal Center. And so I think it's important for people to see that we're not only out there to be, outreach spokespeople. We are working towards just global ocean conservation and these types of initiatives. And so serving as a conservation model and exhibiting these behaviors works towards that community engaged approach where people are going to start modeling these positive behaviors that they see other people in the community doing. And so it's pretty powerful to be able to say that you sort of work as a model within conservation and have other people sort of mimic those behaviors to work towards these conservation goals as well. In terms of challenging, I faced numerous challenges throughout my work at Keikaiola. This internship really forced me to think on my feet, make quick decisions, and have a lot of situational awareness and use reasoning in my response to different situations. So this photo here I took of a seal that decided to haul out at a high-end resort. And she didn't just haul out at their beach, but right in the middle of their beach operations, right? You can see there's a jet ski out here, and their outrigger canoes, there's surfboards, paddle boards. Over here, they had some snorkeling stuff. And so it was challenging. When I got there, it was very, you had to have I had to use a lot of situational awareness to be able to construct the seal awareness zone in a manner that would provide the seal with enough space to rest, but also not disturb the operations of the beach. But I think the most important thing in doing this was remembering that the seal has just as much of a right to be resting on that beach as do the people who paid a lot of money to stay at the resort, right? And so in my interactions with people when I'm doing outreach, it's all about remembering that message and fostering that message that people and seals can coexist peacefully on the beaches together without disturbing one another. And I did this again by using that positive outreach approach and tried to inspire emotions in people and make them feel passionate about the seals. Another deliverable or outcome that I got from this internship was knowledge about my agency ecosystem. So working for Keikaiola, I definitely got to see firsthand how a conservation nonprofit is operated, some of their sort of managerial procedures, and to a lesser extent, the Marine Mammal Center as a world-leading conservation organization as well. But I really gained a lot of people skills and volunteer coordination and management skills from this. I will say that I'm very proud of some of the things that we did with our response team. They're amazing individuals, and one of the things that I am the most proud of that I created was this response volunteer field guide. So I had been listening to volunteer feedback, and I noticed that some people were a little bit unsure of some of the seals or some of the locations. And so in order to adapt to that model of building onto their strengths, I decided to create a field guide. And so this field guide contains detailed information not only about the seals on Big Island, right? So the seals, their tag numbers, some of those distinctive physical identifiers that I was talking about earlier, anything they could want to know about the seals, but also about the most common haul out locations that they were called to, right? And the reason I felt this was important is because it has to do with accessibility and ability to get to these outreach places. So if you're called to respond to a seal and you have no idea where this place is, you might be a little bit nervous or have some anxieties about what this place is like. And so I not only included maps of the locations where the volunteers might be asked to go, but also things like, is there shade at the beach? Are there bathrooms? Does it require a four-wheel drive vehicle? You know, what's the hike like? Is it sand? Is it rocks? Is it things like that? And so I feel that this really helped people and built their confidence to be able to go out and be those messengers that we want them to be. Additionally, I was super excited about helping to pilot the volunteer mentoring program, in which we partnered all of the onboarded volunteers with some veteran volunteers for their first few outreach shifts. And this had several purposes. First, it allowed them to be more comfortable in their first few shifts out on the beach, because it's always better when you go out with someone else. Secondly, it exposed them to a variety of different outreach styles. Everyone does outreach differently, and everyone has their own strengths and weaknesses. And so by exposing newly onboarded volunteers to different outreach styles, it allows them to build a greater depth of outreach experience. And then lastly, just to help build new relationships on the volunteer team. Our team is only as strong as the relationships within it. And so by connecting these new volunteers with veteran volunteers, you're sort of establishing right away these sort of personal relationships and connections with people. Another thing that I was super fortunate to have gained from Keikaiola was the ability to handle difficult situations with professionalism. This photo over here to the right, I took of a situation that happened to me on the beach. I was doing outreach with a few people. It wasn't a super, super busy beach, but this gentleman sort of was making a beeline, and I went down to approach him and make him aware of the seal awareness zone. He completely ignored me, stepped right over the line, and when I tried to approach him and say, "Oh, excuse me, sir, we have a seal over there," he said, "I don't care, I'm wildlife too," and just kept on walking. And it's interesting because what I did is I completely disengaged. I attempted to use positive outreach. He responded negatively, and at that point I said, "I'm going to disengage." And so he walked past the seal, right to about these rocks over here, and then he stopped and turned around and walked away, and we never saw him again. The whole thing lasted about 15 seconds, and the seal didn't wake up. She was none the wiser. But what was interesting in this instance is that the reason that he did walk away and didn't engage further is because he was looking for reaction. He wanted me to respond negatively. He was looking for that confrontation. And when he saw that I was not going to engage with him negatively and I was only going to respond positively, it almost seems like he felt very foolish because he walked away and I never saw him again. And more importantly, in that situation, the people that I had been doing outreach with saw this whole encounter, right? They saw the way that I handled it professionally and positively, and how I did not engage when he attempted to interact with me negatively. And so I really want to thank my mentors at Keikaiola for being such great models and showing me how to respond to these difficult situations professionally, because I was very confident in my ability to handle these difficult situations. And I think I will be moving forward as a conservation professional as well, because things are never going to be perfect, right? But it's how you handle the situations that's what really matters. So the next outcome or deliverable that I gained was an understanding of the parameters of the agency's purview. So obviously, when you're working with an endangered species, there's lots of regulations and rules to take into account, mainly the Endangered Species Act and the rules relating to take. And so I was super fortunate to be able to witness some of these procedures and processes firsthand. These two photos that I included are of a Keikaiola staff member who was putting a temporary bleach mark on one of our seals here on Big Island. And this requires tons of licensing and permitting and going through the correct channels just to do something as simple as putting a bleach mark. So it really highlighted to me the importance of knowing the laws surrounding your agency and why those laws are in place. Additionally, I have done here just a snapshot of the 2019 Annual Marine Mammal Commission meeting. I was super fortunate to be able to attend this meeting. And the coolest thing about this meeting is that it's sort of a coalescence of government organizations, nonprofits, researchers, and community members that all come together and talk about some of the latest research and laws relating to marine mammals. And while there was definitely people that had slight differences of opinion in terms of the way that things should be done or the specific parameters of different laws, it was really inspiring to see that the reason that everyone was there was because of their passion for marine mammals. So despite the little differences that people had in their methodologies or their strategies, people were there attending that meeting, voicing their opinions because they do care about marine mammals. So that was a very powerful thing to see at that meeting last year. My last outcome that I wanted to discuss obviously was advocacy and outreach experience. I gained a ton of this throughout my internship in a variety of different settings, right? In those informal science education settings, and then also here as a public spokesperson on the beach. And I don't mean to brag, but you do not get a beach to look like this unless you are good at outreach. I mean, there's over 100 people here on this beach, and this seal has so much space to be able to relax. She was actually molting at this time, which is super critical for her to be able to rest and relax and molt in peace. And I'm not gonna lie, when I first started this internship, I was super nervous about doing outreach because the thought of like walking up to strangers on the beach and having to engage with them and talk to them about seals was a little bit intimidating. But throughout my experience, what I actually found is that my most powerful tool was listening to people. Because when you're out there as a public spokesperson doing outreach, people don't expect you to talk with them. They expect you to talk at them. So when you engage bidirectionally and talk to members of the community to get their opinions or their experiences and stories about the monk seals, that's when you really start to make connections. And I've seen that the most effective times I've been able to inspire emotions in people is when I have bidirectional conversations with them and engage them and ask them questions. So I think it was so powerful and inspiring to be able to see how these conversations had real world implications, because here at this beach and here we had members of the community doing our job for us. They were patrolling sort of the edges here of this seal awareness zone and informing people that there was a seal there and telling them, oh, the seal is molting, she has to rest. And it was probably the most powerful part of my internship to see the real world results of our positive outreach and the effects that it had on our community that helped us conserve this species. So last, I'm going to jump into my discussion and conclusion, talking about some of the conclusions from my internship. So the ecological significance of this project is that I furthered the Marine Mammal Center's mission of advancing global ocean conservation. I reduced anthropogenic threats to Hawaiian monk seals by decreasing their negative human interactions. Additionally, I documented seal presence on Hawaii Island and monitored health. And monitoring efforts are super important because, like I said, they're the first step to species recovery efforts. Additionally, I feel like my internship had lots of lasting social impacts. So first and foremost, I fostered local environmental stewardship that will help to conserve endangered and endemic species. More importantly, even when Kei Kaiola is not around, right? So these conversations that I had with people in the community inspired them to help become eco-guards for monk seals and other endangered species here in Hawaii. In terms of the response team, I created resources and implemented new strategies to build upon the existing strengths of Kei Kaiola's response team, and I was able to use social marketing for solutions that tackled larger environmental issues around the world. And again, I did that by relating these abstract, theoretical, larger conservation issues and using the monk seal as a vessel to talk about those. So in terms of my professional path, this internship allowed me to gain a diverse skill set and real-world conservation agency experience during my graduate school journey. I also had the freedom to incorporate my previous interests, including human behavioral research and community engagement, into my approach to this conservation issue. And I truly think that that's what made my project so effective and impactful, is because it was so holistic. And I was able to pull from all of these different areas and apply them to conservation biology. So that concludes my talk, but before I sign off here, I would like to give a huge shout out and mahalo to Megan McGinnis, my amazing mentor at Kei Kaiola. She taught me so much and was such a great mentor. I've learned so much from my time there. So thank you, Megan. I also want to give a huge shout out and mahalo to Lisa Canali for not only supporting and advising me throughout the course of this project, but also throughout the entirety of my TCBES graduate school journey. I couldn't have done this without Hilo's TCBES MS program, and also the Marine Mammal Center and Kei Kaiola for having me as an intern. If you have any questions or would like to contact me, I have my contact information listed here. And what would this presentation be without one last final piece of advocacy? So if you are ever out on Hawaii Island and you happen to see a monk seal and you don't see any Kei Kaiola response volunteers around, go ahead and call or text this number and report the seal and let them know that the seal is there. So that is everything I have for you. Mahalo.
Oh, hi, Kelsey. Thank you so much. That was fantastic. We really appreciate your sharing your journey with us. We do have a question. It's from Samantha, and she is wondering, when you gave the tours at the facility, do the people get to see the seals that are currently being housed? How are the visitors and the seals kept separate?
That's a really great question, Sam, and super important, right? Because I talk a lot about how it requires that emotional connection to the seals. So in order to prevent habituation of the seals that we have, especially because they're from the northwestern Hawaiian Islands, we actually have the seals housed here in what we call the burrito. It's this big building here, and only trained volunteers are allowed in there. And when they do go in there, they use things like crowding boards and towels over the seals' eyes so that seals can't actually see them. What we do during tours with the public is, it's kind of small, you can't really see it, is we have a TV set out on the educational lanai with a live feed that has cameras where the seals are, right? And so people are able to see the seals over the live feed in real time. And so that's how we sort of mitigate the whole human habituation, contact with people thing, while also showing them the seals that enables us to get that like emotional reaction or connection with the seals. But that's a great question.
So I have to share this shout out for you. It's from Megan McGinnis, and she says, "Amazing presentation, Kelsey. You did such an outstanding job with your entire internship. We were so lucky to work with you!" Exclamation point. Megan, Heidi, and Ashley.
Oh, thank you guys. That's so sweet.
And then I have a question for you regarding the
Yeah.
work that you did to improve the volunteer response team's work ethic. And
Mhm.
I know there were many people that have been volunteering for many, many years. And I was
Mhm.
wondering how they reacted to the positive changes that you were implementing.
Um, that's a great question. I received a lot of positive feedback from people. And I think the reason why is because I was a very good listener, right? A lot of people that sort of take on more responsibilities in agencies like to implement things without, you know, understanding the actual agency. And so I tried to focus a lot on like listening to people and taking their concerns into consideration. And so I think that people responded very positively because it's the changes that they had been asking for. But yeah, that's a great question.
And do you have any idea if the field guide that you've created, if that's going to be emulated at other locations where there are endangered seals?
I would hope so. Yeah, I would hope that it could serve as at least like a starting point or a model for other places.
And then I'd like to ask you, this is Dr. Osterteg's question, is
Mhm.
in the work that you did, how did the work at the professional internship um, inform your academic studies? And then how did your academic studies inform the work at the internship?
Yeah, that's also a very great question. I feel like because I had the freedom to choose my own courses in the TCBES program. The fact that I could choose such diverse courses, right? I mean, we took classes such as organizational management. I took statistical classes. I took, you know, social science research methods in like for the environment. And I feel like it was the culmination of all of those skills. Like it wasn't just analytical or just social. It was because it was such a holistic um, and diversified coursework that I was able to have such a diversified internship. And in terms of taking the skills I learned in my internship to my classes, I think I was also able to do that too. I was able to look at some of the issues that I was seeing in monk seals and then do some class projects and research to explore those a little bit further. So for example, I took like a GIS class and I was able to use some of the things that I had noticed about like climate change and habitat loss and things like that to look at heterogeneity in climate change risks for Hawaiian monk seal habitat. But I wouldn't have even had the idea to do that project had I not done this internship with Kei Kaiola and got to know the seals and the threats facing them so like kind of intimately.
And then I have another question for you from Dr. Ostertag. She is wondering, did you come into the program knowing that you wanted to do outreach or only that you wanted to work with marine mammals?
No, I definitely did not come in thinking I was going to do such an outreach heavy project. I would never have seen myself doing such an outreach heavy project. I was drawn to the marine mammals. That was definitely the sort of realm I wanted to work in. But I'm actually so happy that I ended up doing more of a, you know, social outreach thing. I mean, there was data involved, but I'm actually really happy that my internship morphed into what it did because I did not see myself doing this in the beginning, but I think I have grown so much as a professional and just personally because of I've gained confidence in my ability to do outreach and to connect with people, especially about species like the Hawaiian monk seal.